The Bible says that Jonah was vomited onto dry land by a great fish. But if Nineveh, the prophet's final destination, is over 1,000 kilometers from the nearest sea, how could this be possible? Is the Bible making a geographical error? Or is there a detail, overlooked by many but essential, that completely changes our understanding of this story? Be ready, because what you'll discover in this video may challenge everything you've ever known. And comment below. Have you ever wondered how Jonah ended up in Nineveh if the city has no nearby sea? Jonah was a prophet in a turbulent time in Israel's history, called directly by God for an unusual mission to pray for the capital of the enemy empire, Nineveh. The order was clear and direct. Arise, go to the great city of Nineveh and weep against it. Quoto. This city was the center of Assyrian power, an empire known for its brutality and oppression of neighboring peoples. It was a divine order that carried not only risk, but also scandal. A Hebrew prophet was to go alone into the heart of the most cruel empire of the time to confront its enemies. To many, this seemed like a death sentence. But Jonah, after receiving this mission, made a drastic decision. Instead of heading east to Nineveh, he fled east to Tarshish, a distant city possibly in modern-day Spain. He left for the port of Joppa on the coast of Israel and traveled on a merchant ship. This departure was not only geographical but also spiritual. Jonah sought to escape God's presence as if it were possible. His act of rebellion was not born of ordinary fear, but of a deep-seated resistance to the proposal. During this escape, a violent storm arose at sea. The pilots who tested the ship quickly realized that the storm was unnatural. The ship was about to sink, and they cried out to their gods, throwing cargo into the air. While the chaos continued, Jonah slept. The contrast between the pagans' despair and the prophet's apathy is stark. Awakened by the captain, Jonah doesn't pray, but simply admits to being the cause of the disaster. He acknowledges that he is running away from the God who created the sea and the land. After hunting down lots and confirming that Jonah was responsible for the storm, the flyers reluctantly accept his proposal to hunt him down. Jonah knew his presence was the reason for divine judgment on the ship, and so they did. Immediately, the sea calmed. The surprised flyers recognized the God of Israel and offered sacrifices in his honor. Even in his rebellion, Jonah was instrumental in turning the pagans back to the true God, a profound irony in the narrative. But when defeated, Jonah does not die. God, in an act of incomprehensible mercy, sends a great fish to soothe him. Jonah remains 3 days and 3 nights in the animal's chest. This period has become a symbol of spiritual transformation. Isolated there, surrounded by darkness and despair, the prophet reflects. He prays, weeps, and repents. His recorded prayer is filled with vivid images and words that demonstrate a heart that has been broken and restored. Biblical geography helps us understand where this might have happened. If Jonah left Joppa and was defeated in the Mediterranean, then the fish that soothed him was also in that region. The text doesn't indicate that the animal walked thousands of miles to Nineveh, which would be impossible because the city was landlocked. Instead, the text simply says that the fish vomited Jonah onto land. There's no mention of Nineveh at this point, and this is crucial to understanding the rest of the story. This small detail is a powerful clue. God didn't transport Jonah directly to his mission. He delivered him from death and restored his faith, but he left the prophet to make the rest of the journey alone. Jonah had to walk thousands of miles on foot. This changes everything. The restoration wasn't instantaneous or desperate. It was a process that needed to be supported. And this process begins shortly after Jonah's feet touch dry land again. When the great fish obeys divine command and vomits Jonah onto land, a new stage in the prophet's mission begins. The Bible doesn't specify exactly where he was left, but we know it wasn't Nineveh. The Assyrian city was located in Mesopotamia, more than 1,000 kilometers from the Mediterranean. It's reasonable to conclude that Jonah was thrown back onto the coast of Israel, perhaps even near the port of Joppa. the same place from which he fled. If you enjoyed this type of video, please click the like button and leave a comment to let us know where you're watching it. This symbolic return to the starting point carries a profound spiritual lesson. God could have used any method to take Jonah directly to Nineveh, but he chose to return the prophet to the land with a clear command: get out and go. Now, Jonah would have to travel the entire distance to the assured city alone. The journey was not only physical, but spiritual. He would have to face his resistance, his loss, and the weight of the mission he had previously rejected. Jonah's journey to Nineveh required crossing dangerous and unexpected regions. The available routes led through deserts, arid plains, and areas ruled by hostile peoples. Caravan routes, such as the Via Maris or the Route of the Kings, which connected the Mediterranean with the cities of Mesopotamia, were common. Travelers, soldiers, merchants, and pilgrims traveled along these paths to protect themselves from robbers and wild animals. Jonah, however, was no merchant. He was a solitary man with a prophetic mission. It is remarkable that even after his marvelous surrender, Jonah did not receive transportation from heaven to Nineveh. God wanted him to feel the weight of the journey. Each mile traveled was a reminder of past disobedience, and at the same time, a strengthening of his resolve to obey now. The mission would not be accomplished by supernatural force alone, but by determination, obedience, and persistence. God saved Jonah, but now it was Jonah who had to make his own way. During the journey, the prophets certainly had plenty of time to reflect. The arid landscape, the natural hardships, and the dangers of the road created the ideal place for a heart to be formed. Perhaps it remembers the prayer spoken into the fish's chest. Perhaps it was frightened by what it would find in Nineveh. But above all, he was now willing to obey. This is an essential mark of true restoration. Not just rethinking, but the determined practice of obedience. Reaching Nineveh involved crossing the Tigris River near the present-day city of Mosul in northern Iraq. The city was one of the oldest in the world, filled with palaces, temples, and fortified structures. Its walls enclosed a vast urban area that took 3 days to cross on foot. According to the biblical text, it was the symbol of Ashur's power, and therefore the epicenter of paganism and violence. With each step, Jonah drew closer to a people he despised, but whom God desired to reach. Completing this long journey, Jonah finally reached the gates of Nineveh. He is weary, bruised from recent experiences, but with a new sense of purpose. What happens next will be one of the most impressive events recorded in Scripture, but none of it would be possible without this preceding phase, the arduous journey from the coast to the heart of Assyria. It is on this kind of journey that God forges not just messages, but transformed men from within. When Jonah enters Nineveh, he carries not only the wood of the road, but the weight of a profound spiritual experience. The great and imposing city was the ultimate symbol of Assyrian power. The walls were so thick that chariots could run alongside you. Thousands of people lived amid idolatry, pagan sacrifices, and the brutality typical of a warring empire. It was into this hostile environment that God sent a single prophet with a message of judgment. Jonah's prayer was short and to the point. 40 more days, and Nineveh will be defeated. Jonah 3:4. There was no attention to cultural adaptation, contextualization, or theological explanations. His message was a warning. The content didn't appeal to emotion, nor did it make any promises. It was an ultimatum. But surprisingly, the people of Nineveh responded with immediate suddenness. From the simplest to the king, everyone humbled themselves. They dressed in sackcloth, swayed, and cried out for mercy. The king of Assyria stepped down from his throne, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat in flames. He then decreed a national festival that even included the monsters of the countryside. The scene is one of collective suddenness. The cruelest and most merciful city in the ancient world turned away from the message of a single man. This unprecedented event reveals the spiritual impact that a word from God can have, even if delivered reluctantly. Nineveh's transformation defies all expectations. Jonah expected resistance, ridicule, or even persecution. Instead, he found broken hearts. God saw the people's suddenness and decided not to destroy the city. Judgment was suspended, and mercy triumphed. This divine decision reveals a fundamental principle. A true suddenness, even among distant peoples and enemies of Israel, is enough to move God's heart. Jonah, however, did not react with joy. After seeing that God had delivered Nineveh, he was deeply disappointed. His nationalism spoke louder than his compassion. He knew that the Assyrians, if liberated, could terrify Israel in the future, as indeed happened. His desire was to see the city destroyed, not restored. This shows that, although he obeyed on the outside, there were still unresolved issues in his heart. The prophet desired justice, but God chose grace. This contrast between God's heart and the prophet's heart intensifies when Jonah leaves the city and sets up camp outside. He hopes the destruction hasn't yet arrived. There, in the heat, God causes a plant to grow to provide shade for the prophet. Jonah rejoices, but shortly afterward, a weed destroys the plant, and the sun punishes him. Once again, Jonah wishes for death. This overreaction reveals how much his heart still doesn't understand what truly matters. Then God speaks to Jonah directly and pedagogically. You had compassion on the plant, and I would not have compassion on Nineveh, that great city with its 120,000 people. This question ends the book without an answer from the prophet. The final silence is intentional. He invites the reader to reflect. What weighs most heavily on us? Our comfort zone is the soul God desires to reach. The story ends openly, but the lesson remains alive, provoking every generation. The moment a great fish vomits Jonah onto the landmarks is more than the end of a test. It's the beginning of a new state. God has disciplined him, restored him, and now reintroduced him to the path of obedience. But contrary to what many imagine, this return did not involve miracles of direct transportation. Jonah's spiritual restoration required a physical journey of over 1,000 kilometers from the Mediterranean coast to central Assyria. Each step was part of a more divine plan. This journey was not only long, it was painful, symbolic, and formative. Jonah needed to go through the process. He needed to walk, remember, think, feel the weight of responsibility, and prepare for the mission. The fish saved him from death, but not from responsibility. God could have transported him supernaturally, but he chose to use time and distance as refining tools. This is how God forms his servants, in one way or another. The biblical text is completely silent on the details of this journey. No verse describes the deserts crossed, the dangers faced, or the lonely nights under the Mediterranean sky. But this silence carries a powerful message. The focus is on restored obedience, not the difficulty of the journey. Jonah,